Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Beers with Engineers podcast. This is the podcast for engineers that aims to provide a pint of fun and an occasional shot of geek. My name is Bert Ushold, and this is episode number 12. My guest today is a former co-worker, Dave Smith, and the podcast title is He Plays Games and Asks Questions. Even though I was in design engineering and Dave was in manufacturing engineering, we got along very well. Before I tell you more about this episode, I would like to tell you a little bit about my company, Dexterity Engineering, at dexterityeng.com. I have over 30 years of product development experience, mostly in medical devices, but also consumer products, a toy or two, and other things. I would love to help you get your product to meet all your stakeholders' needs. About my next podcast, I just finished re-interviewing Sherry, so the next release should be with my first woman engineer. Yay! Unless editing takes too much effort. About this episode, one thing Dave said about engineering is that variety is the spice of engineering. If that is the case, then this is indeed a spicy podcast, because it has even more variety than most. Some things we talk about are college, manufacturing, time travel, games, more games, movies, and asking questions. With that, let's begin. Good day, everyone. Today my guest is Dave Smith. Welcome to the Beers with Engineers podcast, Dave.
Thanks, Bert.
All right.
It's great to be here.
Likewise, it took us a while to work through some technical difficulties, but we did it. So Dave is an engineer at Avery Dennison in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, and we worked together for about 4 years, making cable ties and those little plastic fasteners that hold price tags to the clothes that you buy. I was in the design department, and he was in the manufacturing, working on the floor a lot, maybe not always, and I think we did a good job of avoiding the animosity that sometimes occurs between those two departments. So what can I say about Dave? Well, there's a fair chance you've heard someone compliment of the statement like, he doesn't play games. I'm not sure Dave would like such a person. Dave plays games. A lot of games. But fortunately, that's his personal life and not his professional life. But he has been known to pull out a board game or two during lunch breaks at work, which I don't think I ever joined you playing board games at lunch. Anyways, odds are very good that we will talk about games at some level in this conversation today. So without further ado, let's get going. So Dave, we were planning to talk at 9:30 in the morning, and you were planning on not having a beer, but it's now later in the afternoon. It's getting close to happy hour. Are you having a beer? And if not, what beer would you like to be having?
I am having a beer.
All right.
I've chosen strategically, I've chosen Maple Sunday. And the reason I chose this one for our time, Bert, is because it has math and engineering association for me recently. Well, first off, it's an imperial brown ale with a maple syrup flavoring added. So that makes it very kind of niche already. Most people don't like brown ales. Most people don't like imperials. So now it's an imperial brown ale, and then add the maple syrup, and it's very out there. So, but the reason it's mathy is because my brother-in-law, I was at his house this past summer in Sturbridge, and I tasted it and loved it. And he said, man, they got this crazy deal at Yankee Spirits where a 4-pack of these are going for like $5, and usually a 4-pack of 16-ounce imperial brown ales or whatever is like double that. And so we went back to the store, and they still had a bunch left. So he and I both bought out the rest of their supply. And so since then, we've been kind of texting back and forth about our Maple Sunday consumption statistics. And we're both at about 3 or 4 every 2 weeks now with our own drinking plus giving them away to others because we have so many of them.
Yeah. So what'd you say the cost was?
Like $5 for a 4-pack of 16 ounces.
I mean, that's like a good deal for just about any beer. That's almost a good deal for Busch Light, I think, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a pretty good deal. So that's why we bought them all out. It's like, this is insane. So
it's
really good.
Yeah. So now the maple made me think. So I, as you know, I live in Leominster, which most people may not know is the birthplace of Johnny Appleseed, who is in fact a real person. And for a few years, I would tap the maple trees in the yard, not apple trees, maple trees, and make maple syrup. And to combine the maple and Johnny Appleseed, I made some labels that had a picture of me with a tin pan or the cooking pot on my head, and I said I was Bertie Mapleseed. So isn't that kind of silly and goofy, but so there it is.
I appreciate goofy.
All right. So we have addressed the beer issue. Do you have a joke, engineering-related joke, that you can share with us, Dave?
So a clever one I heard recently that stuck out with me for some reason, and I'm going to admit right off the bat it's more of a math or programming joke, and I'm sure you've probably heard it before, but there are 10 types of people in the world, those that understand binary and those that don't.
I like that one. It's much more visual, but I do like that. It's a good one. That is a good one.
I'm typically not really a big fan of jokes, and my memory's really bad, so a lot of them don't stick with me. But that one, the cleverness kind of hit me with that one.
Yep. Yeah, no worries. There was one of my guests. He said he actually had a Google one, so I'm loose on the engineering aspect of it. Anything technical and geeky will pass muster. All right, so there we go. Got that out of the way. Typically start with a little bit on your background, somewhat specifically, why did you decide to become an engineer? Any interesting stories about that?
The why I became an engineer is not very interesting. I basically just kind of fell into it because I was good at math and science, and people suggested I get into engineering, and so I sort of included Worcester Polytechnic Institute in my rotation of colleges I was visiting.
Yep.
And just I sort of jived with the feel of the school and like just seeing all these major qualifying projects in this like project fair that they had for people who were like touring the school. Mm-hmm. It felt like home to me. So I sort of ended up there. I wasn't even like decided as far as like what my major was. So I started off my freshman year undecided and didn't even pick engineering or mechanical engineering until like my sophomore year officially.
Okay.
But all these like accidental moves that weren't really like sort of proactively chosen, they all worked out because I feel like it's really me and it fits me well. And I like a lot of the things about mechanical engineering. So I sort of accidentally ended up in the right spot, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there are people that say you got to plan your career, and there are some that do it and some are successful at it. And I am not one who has planned my career. And I was just talking to somebody recently I think things have gone very well for the most part. And if you had asked me 30 years ago to write out a plan anywhere near what has happened, I don't think I could have come up with it. So, yeah, very good. I know one conversation we had not too long ago. So you've been at Avery Dennison, what was it, 10, 15 years? I forget.
Almost 20. It'll be 20 years in July. Yep.
All right. And one thing we forgot to talk about in the green room before we started talking was, so those little fasteners that hold your clothing on, Avery Dennison makes those in two ways. One, they just injection mold them, big clumps of them, like 40 of them in one part, and those are little kind of like a
clip, they're called.
A clip, thank you. That was the word. I was going magazine, a different ammunition thing, but a clip is better. So that's one way. Then they make them another way, and which I think is really cool, but I'm not certain how much of that is public knowledge or public, known technology.
Yeah, I think I'm allowed to talk about it on the overview verbal level. I've talked about it with people on the phone and described it in general, and I don't feel, and like suppliers and stuff, and I don't feel like I'm not allowed to do that.
Okay, good.
Basically, you want me to describe it in a nutshell?
Yes, please do.
Okay. So there's an extruder at the beginning of it. We'd put material into a barrel, which is basically a big cylindrical tunnel. And then there's a screw in the middle with kind of like a helical flight of blade on top of the screw. Just like a normal screw, you might screw a wood screw in your house into something, or a drywall screw.
Right.
And then the plastic pellets take a ride all around those screw flights, and while they're doing that, there's like heater bands that are heating up that entire tunnel as well. So you get the pressure of those pellets being squeezed by the screw flights and the heat from the barrel and you end up with plastic molten coming out the end. And then you can do different things with the plastic. And what we do with the plastic that's spitting out the end is a little bit unique, why our process is kind of special. Most of the time, people take that molten plastic and they push it through like a shape, like a profile or a tubing, and tubing comes out. What we do is we take the molten plastic, it comes through like a chevron shape, and then that's smashed against a rotating wheel we call a mold wheel. And that molten plastic then gets pushed into shaped cavities that are cut into the outside diameter of the wheel. And those shaped cavities are the fasteners in a continuous strip or continuous feed of fasteners that are all connected with different connectors. So it's continuous. And then it takes a ride around the wheel, and then we cut the excess plastic off the surface, and what's left inside the cavities is then pulled out and goes through pinch rollers, which kind of drag it out of the wheel and continue it downstream to do other things like stretching and winding and such. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's a really neat process. Have you done any traditional extrusion? Because my sense is that for what you guys are doing, what Avery Dennis is doing, it's hotter and a lower viscosity. Does that sound true, accurate to you?
I have not been involved in the traditional extrusion, but I believe what you're saying is correct. I think it would almost have to be, because we don't want it to have a shape for a little while, for several seconds, whereas I think the profile extrusion wants it to take shape very quickly. So I think you're right.
Yeah, so it's called an extrusion, but it's sort of a hybrid of extruding and injection molding, and it's just a real neat process. It
really is neat. I've told one of my coworkers earlier this week that if we didn't have the extrusion process at Avery Fastener, I don't know if I would be there or have ever come there or would have stayed as long, because it kind of pulls you in from a manufacturing engineering perspective, because it's so different and unique, and there's so many custom things that are all associated with like everything from start to finish with it.
Yeah. You mentioned that in a conversation we had a couple of months ago, and I was going to tread lightly on bringing that up, because I'm not sure you wanted to say for the world that if there was no extrusion, I'd leave the company. So you said it. So I'm fine with
threatening that, Bert. Then maybe they won't get rid of it.
All right. Good. All right. So in case anybody, Avery Dennis, is listening, don't get rid of the extrusion.
Don't get rid of extrusion.
Or else
the moral of the story.
Or else Dave will go for the ride. So, anyways. Okay. Yeah. And it's about maybe 180 cavities on the mold wheel, something like that.
It depends on what the product is, but it ranges from about 200 up to 400.
Oh, it's that many? I thought it was even less than that.
Yeah, for the fine fabric plastic staple, it's, I think, 400 cavities.
Okay, and it's about a 4-second revolution? Somewhere around there, 4 to 6?
Usually 8 to 12 RPM.
8 to 12 RPM, divided, so that's 5 to 6 seconds. Yep.
5 to 6 seconds, yep.
So 8 RPM times 200, that's 1,600 pieces per minute.
Yeah, it's an insane throughput.
It's a lot of little plastic parts. And to my knowledge, where those are used the most is one in pineapples.
Correct.
Tagging the labels on pineapples. And you've probably seen the video. And if you haven't, you got to find a person who has it, of the guys down in Costa Rica, wherever. There's a pneumatic tool, looks sort of like a gun, and it fires off one of those fasteners. And so this operator has a stack of cards with a hole in it, and he puts it's a 2-inch or so long needle through the hole into the pineapple, fires it, goes on and does the next one. And he's got like a 2-second cycle time. It's just crazy fast.
I think you're actually slow, Bert. I think he tags 8 pineapples in 1 second. I think it's that fast. It's his hand is like a cobra. It's crazy.
It's right. And I don't know the learning curve to get to that. There's got to be a few Band-Aids on the finger as that needle hits your hand instead of the pineapple.
He's got to have some injuries on his hand at some point.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find a video of that, either the machine or the pineapple or both, and put it in the notes, because it's just a cool thing to see. It's a really cool thing to see. And the other place where it's commonly used is for socks, holding the socks together. So one of the challenges for the mold wheel or the injection wheel, whatever, that Dave talked about, he and I worked on quite a bit a few years ago. There's a slightly different application for the fasteners, and they were breaking, but not all the time. And we spent, several days, hyper-focused, and many weeks less so focused, trying to find out what was happening.
Yeah.
And, we turned every dial and knob that we could think of, hotter, colder, faster, this, that, or the other thing. And I think we made improvements.
Yeah.
But we never quite solved it.
The irony behind it, Bert, was the fact that we wanted it to be weaker.
That's right.
Usually it's the other way around. Usually you're like, oh man, the quality is not good enough. It's not strong enough. But in this case, we actually needed it to be weaker to break easier.
Yeah. So just, there's the T end. And so you got all these things in a big, huge, long strip. And the T ends, there's multiple T ends tagged next to each other. And in between the T ends is where it's supposed to break. And you're right. It was not breaking. And I know we had an idea to try and solve the problem a different way and have the machine break it positively instead of breaking in the assembly equipment. And I know
you came up with a nose attachment for the gun, right? That was going to help do that? Or something?
Yeah, I don't know if that ever went anywhere. I'd like to believe it did. So if you buy a pair of Nike socks, it may have been made with the fastener that Dave had his eyes on and worked on and supervised, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And if you've bought pineapples, they almost certainly have the tags attached with our 08285 SKU Swift Touch fastener that we made here in Fitchburg.
Yep. And I'm going to embarrass myself a little bit because I have checked pineapples numerous times, and for some reason it didn't look like the right fastener. There's something that just didn't seem right. And I'm going,
oh, maybe they're replacing us, Bert.
I don't know. I haven't checked in a while, but anyhow. But I'm going to tangent off into something, and then we'll get into games later. But
sure.
Manufacturing is hard. It's kept you on the job. The funny thing is, before I went to Avery Dennison, worked at a variety of product development firms, and I was kind of known as the guy with a lot of manufacturing experience. And when I started at Avery Dennison, I was known as the guy without any manufacturing experience. Because I had done a lot of design and had a lot of conversations with manufacturing guys. I slept at a Holiday Inn. But as far as actually, getting my hands and feet dirty on the floor, I had pretty minimal experience. And it just is crazy how hard it is. You set it up, you do all these validations, and here's our process. And then Tuesday afternoon, yeah, Dave, these aren't working. Can you come fix it? What'd you do? I didn't do anything. It just stopped working.
There's a lot of variables. A lot of variables.
Yep. So with that extreme difficulty of manufacturing, and I'm going to go on a little bit of soliloquy here, so bear with me. There's a book I read a few years ago, which is overall a very good book. I think it was called The Zero Marginal Cost Society or something like that. And just talking about how manufacturing is going to get so good and efficient that things will cost just as much as the material and a little bit of the energy. And there's some interesting stuff in there, but one thing the author kept saying was, well, we'll just, in a few years, we'll be able to 3D print this and that and the other thing. You need a new tractor, 3D print the tractor. Like, we are so far from being able to 3D print a tractor.
Yeah, that's never going to happen.
Just because the materials and how many different materials, how hard is it to make this stupid, it's not. So the other thing, the cable ties are traditionally injection molded. But even so, that is not an easy thing to do.
Nope.
And granted, if you're 3D printing the tractor, you might not need those, but yeah, it's so there's that. And then just taking it to a different level, I forget where, but something talking about exploring space and are there alien civilizations and how might an alien civilization spread through the galaxy or whatever. And this person says, well, you'll make probes and you'll send 200 probes out, and eventually a probe will land on a planet. All right, that much I can sort of buy. And then that probe will explore the planet and replicate itself into more probes and send those off into space.
No.
Oh, you lost me there.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
I mean, if the probe landed on the planet and all the parts were there just ready to be assembled, that would be remarkable. But just
it would still be remarkable, let alone making all the parts.
Yeah, and finding the material, and it's just, I might honestly believe that before that happens, we will create wormholes in space and get from one spot to another. That might happen before a probe lands on a planet and replicates itself.
Yep,
so,
I agree. Time travel might even be easier.
It might. So, anyways, enough of the geek talk. As I said, Dave likes playing games, and also I'll let you talk about games. And all right, Dave, the floor is yours. Talk about games, and then I'll add what I want later.
Okay, so board games sort of became a passion for me, mostly because of my dad. He bought these back in the 80s. I think they were even available maybe in the 70s, but back in the 80s, he bought me these Avalon Hill bookcase games. Back then, they were like very like off the beaten path. Everybody's played Monopoly and checkers and all these like classic, everybody has heard of them type games. And so my dad, I guess, I don't know how he knew, but he somehow knew that I was going to like games, or I like the regular games so much. He was like, what else is out there or something? And so he found these Avalon Hill bookcase games, and he started buying me these for Christmas or birthdays or whatever. Acquire is one that's still very well known. That was an Avalon Hill game back then. And he bought me games that I think are too complicated for what I would prefer now. One called Starship Troopers, where you had these little square chits with 3 numbers on them, and you had to draw maps on hex pieces of paper on where you were deploying units and stuff. And he bought me this in my early teens. And so he kind of like got my brain into these and locked into the gaming from a pretty early age. Mm-hmm. And I never really kind of took it that far. We, did the normal like dorky Dungeons and Dragons stuff and played a lot of Monopoly and Risk and stuff, all these classic games.
Sure.
But then in college, there was a spell where I quit drinking for a while, and I needed something to kind of fill that space. And board games kind of resurged, and there was some other ones that were discovered through friends at college, like they were called Crayon train games, Euro Rails, Empire Builder, I think are the names of those.
Okay.
And,
Empire Builder, I think I've heard of.
Yep. And some other Avalon Hill bookcase games sort of reared their ugly heads again. And so that was my second foray into strategy games. And then we moved to Cincinnati. And we moved to Cincinnati, we attended a game convention, and like a small local game convention, and met this guy who got us into what's called 18XX games. And these are like super intense train games where there's tile laying and a whole stock market and shares of train company stocks. And those were, my wife and I both loved playing those and got into those. And then we took that fateful trip up to Origins, the game convention in Columbus, around the same year that Settlers of Cataan came out.
Okay.
And that was everybody in the world who's into board games before and after knows that the Settlers of Cataan emergence is sort of like, not to be sort of like heretical or blasphemous, but it's sort of like in the board game world, the equivalent of Jesus in the real world, right? So Jesus changed all of time measurement when he came into the world. It was BC and AD. And so the way we measured time and evaluated the whole entire world and history changed when Jesus came. In the little microcosm of board games, when Catan came, it was before Catan and after Catan. right?
Okay.
So after Catan, the
That
whole board game
groundbreaking.
world, yeah, it was insane because after that, the whole board game world exploded and it's never stopped since then. It's like a giant big bang from the Settlers of Catan late 90s era until now, and it's still exploding. Like there's no stop in sight. And so like there's something a ridiculous number, like 10,000 new games every year come out now. It's crazy.
That is crazy. Yeah.
So I've been into them and I've gotten more and more into them. I've even designed some prototypes of my own, and I try to buy and sell equal numbers and trade equal numbers so that I keep my collection around the same. But it's a challenge because you want to try new things, but you have to get rid of stuff that you like. And so that's a fun exercise, deciding when to get rid of games. But I have around 200 in my collection now, which, you know, to my wife seems like way too much. And to some other guys who I've met doesn't seem like much at all.
You're just starting. Yeah. So how long have you kept to that about 200, or has it crept up over the years?
I would say for the last 5 to 10 years, I probably 5 years is when when I got over 200 and tried to bring myself back down and stay around 200.
Okay. And yeah, so I'm wondering, you said back when you were, younger, those bookcase games, there was one we played when I was a kid a handful of times. It was called Stocks and Bonds. Does that ring any bells?
It doesn't ring a bell, no.
Bells? All right. But then, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, I have 3 now teenage boys, all in high school. My brother and sister-in-law gave a gift to them of Settlers of Catan, which I had never heard of before. And so we played it and said, this is really neat. And so my middle son has really taken on to that and other games. Like, I guess really taking on, saying that to you, he's barely scratched the surface, but compared to the rest of the house, he very much enjoys the game. Like Oregon Trail is another one that he's gotten. And it's funny. I've thought about games way too much just because, I don't know, because that's what I do. I think about things way too much. And I sort of like Catan. I sort of don't. And part of what my thinking goes is it's too complicated. You mentioned you had that one game that was too complicated for you. When the rules are in a 20-page booklet, that might be too much for me. Because it just takes so long to learn. So I don't know.
Catan is on the simpler side, Bert. So I hate to break that to you. Different strokes for different folks. Right. I guess the way I try to rationalize, explain, justify, whatever the word is when I'm playing games, I want to relax a little bit more. It's too much thinking for me, which is funny for me to say because I like thinking and solving problems. But I guess when I'm in my relaxing time, I want to take it down a notch and not do so much of it. Yeah, there's definitely people I know that enjoy gaming in the lower thinking realm, and they want to play games and do something fun, but they want it to be more relaxing. And then there's people a little bit more in my range that are like, it doesn't matter. I like ramp it up as complicated as we can get, and I'm up for it,
Yep. And so I just was thinking about this aspect of me and finding, what seemed to be a contradiction is that I like baseball, which among the sports, baseball's pretty complicated. Soccer, kickball, put in net. Baseball, throw ball, hit ball, catch ball, run to a base, but stop there, then run to another base, but only during certain circumstances. And baseball's confusing. And I think, I just thought of this morning, probably as preparing for this conversation with you, is I think the difference is you can play baseball, you can play just tiny bits of it. I can just go out and play catch and sort of say I'm playing baseball. I can throw the ball and you can hit it and say I'm playing baseball. You don't have to have pitchers and balls and strikes and bases and all that thing. There's a million different variations on playing baseball. I don't sense that in Catan. Is that...
I think that's accurate. I think Catan is one system that you have to engage with all of it. You can't do it in chunks.
Yep. It's a bigger thing.
But there is different slices of the game, right? There's the trading aspect, which is, I think, the main thing that blew up the world. Like we never had a game before where there was a free for all trading session, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I think the only other game that had that in the Avalon Hill bookcase game world was Advanced Civilization, and Advanced Civilization is a painful, like 6 to 9 hour endeavor. So I think the guy Klaus Teuber, who invented Settlers of Catan, now called Catan, I think he said, why don't I take the trading session from Advanced Civilization and put it into a 30 to 60 minute game and see if people like it? And man, the guy was right. People loved it.
Yeah. There was a game
and that's kind of, Bert, what people are doing now when they design new games is they're trying to take different game components or game mechanics and make a new combination of them, like different recipes of desserts. They say, oh, what if I took strawberries and put them with this type of thing? Like the same thing's happening in game design. They're saying, let's take a trading session and let's add it to tile placement, and let's add it with take that cards, and let's add it with deck building, right? So people are making a new game by adding these different components together. That's
cool. There's one friend of mine, him and his family does a lot of games. I'm not sure if they do Catan, but one game our families have played together. Have you ever heard of Werewolf?
Yes.
Okay. And that's a fun game. And just for folks who haven't, it's a party
Social
game.
deduction is what the category is.
Social deduction. All right.
Yep.
I guess I should have known there's a category for it. But it's a fun game to play. And there's a one-night werewolf where you just, instead of having several nights of deduction and narrowing things down, you just play it in one night.
Yep.
And I played that once or twice. It just really didn't get the one-night version. I just thought it wasn't any fun whatsoever.
I haven't played the one-night version. My daughter just played it, I think, on New Year's Eve, and she seemed to like it, but I don't know the difference.
Yep. But there was a game we played in college which was interesting. Diplomacy. You heard of that one?
Yep.
Which is fascinating. So Diplomacy is, the board game where you have Europe circa World War I, and then, everybody has a different country. And then, so you start off, you have your own country, you got a couple armies, a couple navies, and then you go off and do your diplomacy. So you say, all right, so me and France want to get together. We want to invade Germany. So I go make a bet with France, and we're going to decide that we're going to invade Germany. But unbeknownst to me, the France guy, he made a deal with Germany that they were going to invade me instead.
Yeah.
And so there's all sorts of conniving and trading and double crossing and, but I'll believe me this time. I know I screwed you last time, but believe me this time, I promise I won't.
Knowing knowing how long to wait before you make that underhanded deal, which gives you the clincher move,
Right. And that's kind of the interesting thing about Catan is you're trading. You could be very stingy in your trading or be generous in your trading. When to be stingy and when to be generous is, part of the challenge, I guess, right?
Yeah. We have another game called Bohnanza, which I accidentally read the rules wrong. It's Uwe Rosenberg is the designer. And when I read the rules wrong, we ended up playing it that way. And later on found out the real rules. And my wife was like, ew, I hate the real rules. Dave, your version is so much better. So we play Bohnanza the wrong way. But that game has lots of fun trading and like promises for the future that you can make. If you ever get a 12 bean, you have to give it to me if I give you this bean now for free, right? And so there's all these like future deals that you make, and hopefully they fulfill their promises.
So that's your version or the by the book version?
I think in the by the book version you can trade for the future, but my version kind of is like more conducive to it because there's more flexibility in the trading, or so I'm told. I haven't even played the regular version really.
Okay, yeah, that one we have too. The same friend that we play Werewolf with, another guy named Smith. I guess something about naming Smith and liking games. Engineers named Smith.
I'll have to send you my version of the Bohnanza rules and see if you want to try them.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. All right, I think we've beaten up on games enough for a little while here. Let's go back to engineering just for some fun.
It is the name of the podcast.
It is, yes, but it's we talk about beers, careers, and whatever else comes up. So
right.
games came up. What? All right, here's one. What do you think you might be if you weren't an engineer? What is something else that interests you? What would you be if you weren't an engineer?
Besides board game designer, you mean?
I'm going to say yes, besides board game designer, because you already mentioned that one.
Yeah. So I guess I would probably be maybe a pastor or something theological.
Okay.
Maybe a Christian counselor or something. I think that would be something I would value, what I'm contributing more than what I'm doing as an engineer. I probably wouldn't be as skilled at it, but
right.
I would feel like I would be, helping people. And that's, an important thing to me. And I love the Bible and I love studying the Bible and talking theology with people. And if I can help people live life better in the process, even better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, so there's another thing we have in common is I am studying to become a deacon in the church, and I don't know if I'll do. Well, I suppose eventually I will be doing just that. My intent is I would be ordained in 3 years, so I'll be, I guess, 60. Probably too early to retire, especially with those aforementioned 3 teenagers in high school likely to be in college.
Ouch.
But yeah, no, that's definitely something I'm looking forward to. It's one of those things, I don't know exactly what it's going to mean, but it's just a little faith in God that it'll be a good thing and we'll help others and enjoy it on the way. So,
yeah, I mean, it is something I do in my spare time now, like just little theology projects, but also just at our church, I'll teach what we call council time session at the Awana Kids Bible Memorization Club. So they have like a breakout session where somebody teaches for 15 or 20 minutes. I've done that numerous times. And VBS, they have gospel presentation times. I've done that. And I've even led the adult Sunday school a handful of times, the 9 o'clock hour before church. And that's been fun. So I think, it's something I enjoy enough in my spare time that I would be okay with it being a career. That's that difficult thing, right? I like doing this in small bites,
right?
But would I really want to do this 40 hours a week? That kind of thing it's a big jump.
Yeah. I've said many times that'd be a lot of fun for a week or two. But
exactly.
do it permanently is quite different. And we ask our 18-year-olds, what do you want to do for the rest of your life?
Yeah. How are they supposed to know?
Right. But a recent interview with a gentleman on the podcast, he said some advice he got from somebody was pick something you love. If you can't find something you love, pick something you like.
Right.
And if you can't pick something you like, pick something you tolerate.
That's great.
And then I think I added, well, good, because then while you're tolerating a job, then you can make some money and feed yourself and look for a job that you like, and maybe that'll lead to one that you love. And sometimes maybe just you'll change your opinion of what you like and love. I'm sure there's many people who have started jobs which they thought they would hate and ended up loving it for 40 years.
I would say, to go back to career commentary, I think my first jobs out of college, they were kind of borderline tolerate like,
right?
And I think when I ended up, as your career progresses and as you kind of find more your kind of like the sweet spot, if you will, I remember the first, 6 months at Avery was tough getting just used to people and the community, and the projects and stuff were very challenging to start with. But I remember once I kind of hit that learning curve spot where I was sort of I felt accepted, acclimated. I just love maybe not love, but I like and love. I kind of moved into the love category instead of the tolerate category Once I found manufacturing engineering, and because manufacturing engineering is so varied, there's a lot of variety. Like one day you might be cutting parts to put on a machine in the machine shop, and then the next day you're running a test in the extrusion department, and then the next day you're troubleshooting a machine in injection, and then the next day you're talking quality defects with the quality department, and then you're writing up a capital equipment request for hundreds of thousands of dollars to do X, Y, or Z. And then it's just, there's like this nice rotation. And I think variety, for me, it's the cliche is it's the spice of life, but it's also the spice of engineering, right? For me, I love the variety of just hitting all those different things and never kind of doing the same thing twice.
Interesting thing about manufacturing is I think many, and maybe even me sometimes, you can look at it as boring. And I think if you're, in an entry-level position, just taking parts out of the mold and packing them and it probably can be pretty boring. But once you get up into a secondary level and a managing level, engineering level, like you said, it's a lot of things, different things every day, I'm sure. So how many days a week, Dave, do you come in the morning and go home in the afternoon not doing anything that you thought you were going to do when you walked in?
Wow. It might be more than 50%, actually.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, all right, I'm going to do this today as you're driving into work. You come in and your boss says, Dave, stop. The such and such machine's not working. You got to fix it stat. Or whatever.
Or this quality defect, the customer wants replacements right away. And
yep.
You and the process tech have to figure out how to get rid of this defect, even though we've been making it the same way for 10 years. That actually happened last week.
Yeah. It's just crazy. It's hard. And I guess I'm kind of glad I'm on the design end of it. I'll let somebody else have those problems.
Well, it's cool. In manufacturing engineering, you do sometimes get to do design too, because you design machines and components for machines. And so you are on the 3D CAD system occasionally, just not as much as you guys are.
Right. And so I guess where I was partly going with that is if you are, I don't know, somebody who's thinking of college or thinking what you want to do with your life, and you go to some manufacturing company that has jobs available, yes, it might be a low sort of menial job, but it's a foot in the door. And if you go in saying, I'm going to learn what I'm doing, I'm going to learn what the person next to me is doing, I'm going to learn a bit of what my supervisor's doing, then, the sky's the limit. And so, I guess I never looked at working on a manufacturing floor as a good entry-level position, but I guess it really is.
I think it can be. The guy who's my fellow manufacturing engineering coworker, he just joined us last year, and he did exactly that. He started off as a maintenance technician and then was willing to learn anything and everything, and started to be learning process technician type stuff and running molds. But he also was still working with machines because he was a maintenance technician before that.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden now he's a shift manager or a technical manager. And so he just kept, as he kept learning and learning quickly and well and executing well, he just kept moving up. And, the job offer came up at Avery to replace Randy, who you and I both know.
Right.
And this guy, there was a lot of ups and downs in the hiring and interviewing process, but eventually we got him. And so he's now a guy, unlike you and I, he doesn't have a degree, but he's very sharp and has all this hands-on, rubber meets the road experience that makes him pretty valuable in the role.
Now, was he, if you said it, I missed it, he was an internal hire or he had that experience somewhere else?
Somewhere else.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. But
the same thing could have happened at Avery, theoretically.
Sure.
Yep.
And there's sometime last year I was talking about a molding company and just talking with a guy and just getting his background. And, I asked him, just curious, not that it really matters, do you have a degree in engineering? He says, no, I started making molds when I was 18 and yada, 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 yada. So you do something for 20 years, you get good at it. And, a lot of things that, you and I did in college, we're not doing at all, if at all.
Yeah.
But we're good at what we're doing because there's this thing called on-the-job training, which we all go through to one extent or not.
Yeah, this is kind of denigrating a little bit to colleges and degrees, but I would almost rather have a really fast learner than somebody who has a degree.
Yeah. Oh, well, you don't have to apologize to me for denigrating colleges. The idea that they are merely a good housekeeping seal of approval as opposed to genuinely learning anything is becoming more and more believed and agreed to.
So we might be on the same page as that.
And there was, just taking that step a slightly different direction, some book I read a few years ago said that, even looking at, say, the Harvards, the Ivy Leagues, it's like, oh, well, you're going there, you're getting the Harvard education is so much better than somebody else's education. And, maybe Harvard's better than Fitchburg State. That's probably true. But, the fact that you have Harvard on your resume is actually much less important than the fact that you were accepted to Harvard. So the person that went to Harvard and the person that got accepted to Harvard but did not go to Harvard have roughly the same career prospects.
Wow.
So, which is just an interesting little tidbit there. All right. Well, I think we're kind of sort of wrapping this up. It's a good, fun conversation. Where's my last item? Let me find my question here. There you go. All right. So the last part of this podcast is the grab bag question. So I think you've listened to a few episodes here. I got 10 questions, 1 to 10. You pick one and I will ask it. Could be silly, could be a little serious. Who knows? What do you got, Dave?
Let's go with number 7. It's the number of completion.
Number 7. I like this. I think you'll have a good answer for this. What is a movie that you like that most people have probably forgotten about or never knew about? It's kind of a tough one. It requires a little bit of thinking. If you're not a movie guy, it'll be a hard one to answer.
Well, I'm just kind of sifting right now in my mind my top 10 list. I have my top 10 list kind of loosely memorized, but not totally. But I think there's some great movies.
And it doesn't have to be a top 10 list. It could be number 25, but just no one else has seen it, or everyone's forgotten about it.
Okay. All right. So let's go with one that probably nobody has seen or barely anybody has seen. It's called Life is Beautiful. Have you ever heard of it?
I don't think so. What time? What year?
I think it came out in the early 2000s.
Okay.
It's a very unique movie. I have never seen anything else quite like it. It's very bizarre in that it's in Italian and you watch it in English subtitles.
Okay.
And the movie has very different feels from beginning to end. It's a World War II movie, and it's such a emotional roller coaster ride. Like, you are just laughing and smiling during parts of it, and you at times like want to just go hide your face in a pillow because you want to just cry so like deeply. And it takes you for such a, like, I don't know if I've ever seen a movie where I've felt such highs and lows as Life is Beautiful. And it's a masterpiece, really. It's probably in my top 20, but not top 10.
Sure.
But it's really good. And I don't think many people have heard of it. And it's a little bit weird just because it is in subtitles, but I would heartily recommend it if you haven't seen it.
Okay. No, I maybe heard of it. I don't know, but I think I will definitely give that a shot. I think we typically, Friday nights around here is usually a movie with me and my wife and our 3 boys. And, what movie it's going to be is often difficult. We went through all the Marvel Cinematic Universe Avengers movies, which we very much enjoyed, and just branched off to things. And I often bring movies kind of that would fit into this category. The one we just saw a week or 2 ago is called FX. Do you remember that?
Never heard of that one.
It was late 80s, 90s maybe. Brian Dennehy, a few other fairly named actors were in it, but the lead role, I forget the actor's name, but he plays a special effects wizard. And these guys come up to him and they want him to fake the killing of a mob boss as part of sort of like a pre-trial witness protection program. He's really protected because everyone thinks he's dead, and then he shows up, and so it's kind of an interesting premise, and then it goes on from there. Lots of twists and turns, but several interesting twists and turns, and I think it's just a fun, interesting movie.
My daughter Trinity, she and I have a going list of plot twist movies that are specifically kind of like specialized in that plot twist where, like, the classic plot twist movie is Sixth Sense, right? Everybody who's seen that knows, like, there's that cliche, like, what? Like, big reveal kind of moments. And so we have a good collection of those, about 30 or so of those. And, we really like the plot twist movies, her and I.
Another one along those lines, just a few years ago, I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was Matt Damon and John Krasinski.
From The Office, yeah.
From The Office, correct. And it was about an oil company, or I can't remember. But
I don't think I've seen that.
Yeah, I remember, I think, we stopped at somebody's house. Maybe they're babysitting our kids. No, I think their child was babysitting our kids, so we were just taking her home. And they asked about the movie and said, would you recommend it? I said, I'm not sure. If you want to go to a movie, it's a good one to see. Now, I'm not saying you have to go out and see it, but if I remember the name of the movie, I'll put it in the show notes. But yeah, and they said, I think it's a good movie. It has a plot twist at the end. So, on the order of Sixth Sense, maybe not quite that heavy a plot twist, but still pretty significant. So
yeah, so I can just list off a few because we kind of joint rank them. We each kind of take our own rankings of them, and then we add them together to see what our joint favorites are.
So these are overall favorites or plot twist favorites?
Plot twist favorites.
Okay.
And for audience, for listeners, be discerning with before you watch it, obviously, because some of them have some inappropriate materials that you might want to avoid or fast forward or whatever. But we both like Fight Club, Memento, Sweet Girl, The Matrix, Shutter Island, Fractured, The Butterfly Effect, The Game, and the number 23. Those are some of our top ones.
The Game was a weird one. I'm not sure I liked it. It's one of those movies that you sort of didn't like, but you might actually like better seeing it a second time.
Maybe. For me, as you know, Bert, I see things through like theological, spiritual lenses a lot of times.
Yep.
And The Game for me was so powerful because of that end scene where he gives up.
Yeah.
And and we're totally spoiling it for people who might watch it. But in the end, he gives up, and through giving up, he finally gets his life back and has a new life, right? And so I feel like that's a very cool spiritual parallel, because I feel like my Christianity, my faith in Christ I only can get a new life by giving up and giving my life to Jesus.
Yep.
And so I see a cool spiritual parallel with The Game, and therefore it's one of my favorite plot twist movies.
Interesting. I may have to rewatch that with that sort of thought in mind. So, all right. Last word, Dave. Thoughts, comments, questions?
I don't know. I feel like we've covered a lot of cool topics here.
Okay.
I know one of your questions, because you were nice enough to send them ahead of time, is tips for new engineers. So I'll just throw, I guess, a few thoughts in that direction.
Sounds good.
So tip number one, and these are actually tips that could be applied in regular life too, but tip number one would be ask questions, right? Don't pretend you know what you're doing. Don't be afraid to admit ignorance. Just say, hey, I've never designed this. I've never done this technical thing before. How do I do this? How would you do it? Asking people for help and input, leaning on your vendors is a lot of things that I do at work, because I have a lot of suppliers that I work with, leaning on them for expertise. is good. And tip number 2 would be, and this might sound bad from the title, but be very pessimistic. Assume your designs are not going to work.
Yeah.
Because it's literally true. Most of the time, most of your designs do not work right away. And so if you're very pessimistic, you will ask those questions. They kind of tie together a little bit. And you'll kind of analyze what could go wrong. Why wouldn't this work? Get people to do the thing that's so important, which is a design review, right?
Yep.
Look over the design and beat it to death. And if it survives the beating, it's probably going to be a little bit better, right? Or if you redesign it to survive the beating, it'll be better. So those are my 2 tips for engineers.
Okay. Have you been through an FMEA?
FMEA is kind of sort of like a design review. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think I've been through FMEAs that were literally 4 days long.
Wow.
And
I don't know if I can handle that.
Yeah, Avery Dennison didn't do them to that level or extent. And these are medical devices, so they take it wicked serious.
That's probably why, yeah.
But yeah, I'm a little bit weird in that there's this part of me that sort of likes FMEAs. It's just forcing you to look at things in all sorts of different ways. And like exactly what you said, what can go wrong?
Yeah, so, I love that way of thinking to kind of prevent the inevitable, or at least partially prevent the inevitable of failure, right?
And I think good engineers, even if they're not going through an FMEA formally, if you're a good engineer, you're doing it at least informally in your head throughout the process.
Yes, and I think when you do those FMEAs and there's design reviews, enough times, that type of critical, it's going to fail, pessimistic thinking kind of works its way into you as you're designing. And like you said, you kind of do it intuitively while you're designing the thing then.
Yep, exactly. I'm sure there's a lot of things I do now with 30 years experience that I never thought of doing when I had only 3.
Yeah, and you do it now without even thinking about it probably.
Right. Awesome,
man.
Dave, this was a lot of work trying to get together.
Yeah.
We've been trying to do this for weeks, and then finally it took several hours today, but we did it. We got it done. We had a good, fun, interesting conversation about a bunch of different things. So
we had to be engineers just to get to talk about being engineers.
Exactly. All right, so we definitely need to have lunch sometime in the near future. But it's been a pleasure. Have a good day.
All right, for sure.
Bye.
Bye.
That wraps up today's episode of the Beers with Engineers podcast. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to like, subscribe, give a rating, and most importantly, tell your friends, whether they are an engineer or not. I'm happy to have them listen. Any comments and suggestions are welcomed and encouraged. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast or know somebody that you think might be a good guest on the podcast, please let us know that too. Until next time, this is Bert saying goodbye.